Athletes love pushing their limits, but intense training can cause serious imbalances. This is exactly what happened to me. My name is Christopher Kelly. When I first entered the world of competitive mountain biking, I became plagued by numerous chronic health issues. So I changed my diet, and I identified my key imbalances with advanced biomedical testing. Before long, I was feeling and competing better than ever. Now, I'm helping other athletes do the same. Welcome to the Nourish, Balance, Thrive podcast. Before we get into this week's podcast, I wanted to extend some thanks to the 30 or so people who joined me over on Patreon. I wanted to let you know that the second episode of my new program is now live on Patreon. The topic is how to get motivated, and my expert guest is Dr. Simon Marshall. To understand the problem, let me read to you this listener-submitted description. Motivation. I don't seem to have any drive to do it, and it seems like a bother when it doesn't seem to make much of a difference. As dumb as it sounds, getting all hot and sweaty and showering after requires planning when I have a family to take care of and a full-time job. I'm always tired and someone always needs something from me. Every week I get myself motivated, even tell someone to hold me accountable. Then life happens and I don't follow through. Actually writing that out makes me feel even worse about it. Does that sound like you? Do you ever struggle to get motivated? I know it describes me sometimes. Well, I would encourage you to listen to episode 2 of my new program that is live on Patreon. Thank you so much for your support. I very much appreciate you. Now, over to the podcast. Alex, thank you so much for joining me today.
You bet. You bet. Thanks for having me. This will be fun. Good.
Yeah, so Alex is a client of ours that we've been working with for a while now, and it's been a lot of fun to work with him. And Alex is very good at playing tennis. Alex, can you...
was very good a long time ago.
Can you tell us about how you got into playing tennis? Can you talk about the first time you picked up a racket?
Well, so I was always a kid that was left in the corner to watch his older brother play. And my career in tennis started just by watching my older brother. And I wanted to be out in the court. I wanted to be the one playing. And so I watched him long enough. And finally I was like, well, I'd like to get into this too. And my parents actually ended up hiring a coach out of Houston, Texas, and brought him to Amarillo, Texas to help my brother with this tennis career. And it ended up helping me at time. He was one of these guys, sort of the Russian style, that just fed you millions and millions and millions of balls. And I had the kind of personality that I like that. And I like to hit millions and millions and millions of balls. So I hit so many balls that I got better and better. And never had a dream of being a professional tennis player, but just wanted to get better. And so he was a perfect guy for me to help me.
Who was deciding this? Was it your parents that were motivated for you to do well?
That's an interesting question, because as a parent, I obviously think about, do I want my kids to play tennis? And you see all kinds of kids. You see the kids who clearly it doesn't come from them. It comes from their parents. You see the kids who I think are fewer in numbers, who just feel it in their heart and they love being out there. They love competing. I was one of those kids. My parents definitely gave me the avenue or the venue to play, but it came from me. I really loved it. I loved getting out in the court. I loved competing. I loved running around. I loved the training. I loved the mental, the physical. I kind of liked all aspects of it. And so I would say I was one of the fewer kids where it really came from me internally and from my heart. And I mentioned my brother earlier. He was a super talented player, but, he just wasn't he didn't love the game of tennis. So he could have been a lot better than me probably, but he just didn't want to dig in and grind it out. And, I think that everyone kind of has their own path, and I chose to dig in and grind and enjoy that part of it.
What was your brother's passion instead? Did he have one?
Yeah, so my brother's he's one of these guys that's a natural athlete at anything he does. And so he ended up going into your field, and he's a bike rider and loves it and trains not as hard anymore. He's 54. And so, he's not training as hard as he used to, but he still loves it and still gets after it. And at one point was a really good bike rider on the amateur level. And please don't ask me any stats because I'm the worst at this.
That's okay. And how old were you when you realized that you had potential as a professional tennis player?
I was lucky because I was able to get into Stanford. And when I went to Stanford, my game improved tremendously. I was a good junior player always, but I was short and I didn't have a very big serve, and I grew about 6 inches in college. And so I grew a lot in college, and I developed a big serve and developed a volley game, and also had the privilege of working with Dick Gould and John Whitlinger as coaches who were, Dick Gould won 16 out of the 32 years that he was there at Stanford. So, we had a pretty amazing college team. I won 3 out of the 4 years and won the Triple Crown my senior year of the NCAA title. So it was one of those deals where you looked on the court next to you and you didn't want to be the guy like letting everyone down. And so I had to work extra hard to catch up with those guys. And I worked hard in the gym and lifted a lot of weights, maybe too many and maybe not in a smart fashion, but I got bigger and stronger and was able to compete on that level. And then I think I played the summer of my junior year and realized that I didn't think the guys were that good on the pro tour, and I thought I was really good. Now, I may have been a little delusional, but I felt like, well, why not? I'll give this thing a chance and give it a run and see if I can do it. And I didn't know if I could do it or not. And I wasn't one of those kids that was like, wow, I'm going to be a professional tennis player for sure. I'm so good. I was more one of these type people that was about the process. And if I could get this piece better and this piece better and this piece better, then, it would allow me to get better at the whole. And that's part of the reason that I like your program. It's kind of about the process.
Ah, interesting. What was your college career like at that time? So you're clearly showing potential as a professional athlete. What happens to your college career when that happens? Do you just still carry on doing courses, and how does it work?
For me, it was a perfect situation because I grew 6 inches in college. And so I was a late bloomer. I was late physically learning my body. And so college was perfect for me. It was a great training ground. After my junior year, I thought I was big stuff. And I think I got my ranking up to 180 in the world that summer by playing in pro tournaments. But I knew also I was realistic. And I thought, why not finish my last year? I love college. I have so many great friends. And so I finished my last year and played for Stanford one more year and finished it up. So, I wasn't like this prodigy or amazing tennis player who was like, oh, I'm for sure out of here. I'm going pro. Mm-hmm. And I was at least smart enough to know I need to stick around and finish up school. And I'm glad I did, looking back.
So when did the moment come that you decided that you were going to be a professional tennis player rather than anything else? What did you study in college? What were the options?
I was an American Studies major, and it's more of a fluffy major. I like to read a lot. And so it was a major that gave me a very well-rounded education, but not really a specific career. And I think that summer of my junior year when I played well on the pro tour, I knew at that point I was going to go pro. And so I think the decision was made then. And then the question became, did I go back and finish my senior year, or did I just head out then? And I made the decision to finish my senior year and then take on the tour.
Mm-hmm. And how does it work? What are the logistics of being a professional tennis player? Is there ever a moment where you sign a contract and you get a deal, or do you have to find the sponsors? How does it work?
The way it worked for me is I played that summer and I had a pretty good summer. I ended up playing a match against Courier first round. Courier is a contemporary of mine. Jim Courier is a contemporary of mine. We grew up together, played together, and we ended up playing first round of the U.S. Open. He was number 1 in the world. He went pro at age 16. I took the college route and went to college. And so we met back and kind of went back battling, but it was quite a different scenario. I'm a no name. He's number 1 in the world, and I'm playing him first round at the U.S. Open. And I took him to 4 sets and lost a close 4-set on stadium court, television match, night match. And that helped me a lot because the sponsors were all like, oh, this kid could be pretty good. Now, I think looking back, they may have, changed their minds, but I ended up signing a contract with ASICS and with Prince tennis rackets. And so it was a really great deal for me. It gave me money to play with and house money that I could travel with. And the biggest expense in tennis is traveling. And so you travel around the world and you're paying for your flights. Now, once you get to the tournament, they pay for your hotel and the food and everything. But you have to get there and you have to achieve a certain level of tournament and ranking to where you can get everything taken care of and paid for. Mm-hmm. It was a big deal for me to get those sponsorships because it gave me a little bit of breathing room to go out and play and get after it.
Mm-hmm. And so you're not profitable from the outset. When did profitability come for you as a tennis player?
I would say probably in my first year, and I'm pretty tight, so I'm pretty frugal. And so I kept it pretty tight and I made sure, and made my reservations ahead of time. I tried to plan as best I could. And so I was profitable probably my first year, but those contracts were a big part of that. And so, you get that upfront money And so that's a big deal for a young tennis player who has no clue what he's doing and just starting out on the tour. And it's rough. They don't treat you you're not treated in a nice fashion when you start out on the tour. And it's a pretty dog eat dog world, and nobody's kind of saying, hey, welcome aboard. I do have one kind of fun story. John McEnroe was obviously a Stanford guy, and he came up to me and said, hey, welcome to the tour. I'm glad you're out here. Good luck. And so, that's a huge deal as a kid growing up watching McEnroe on board, to have McEnroe come up to you in the locker room and say something like that. That helped me a lot. I also had a buddy who knew Yvonne Lindell really well, and so I was able to practice with Lindell at his house before that summer that I played Courier for a week and a half. And man, this guy, you talk about training hard and not taking excuses. He wore me into the ground, and I thought I was really fit and in great shape. And we trained in Connecticut at his house, 95 degrees, 90% humidity. We're out there for 2.5, 3 hours in the morning, and then another hour to 2 hours in the afternoon, and then going running or biking in the evening and then waking up and doing it again. And that's when I realized, okay, this is for real. If you want to play this sport, you're going to have to train hard. You're going to have to be committed and go. And I thought I was until I saw that show.
And was that typical for the Pro Tour tennis players at that time? Was Courier and McEnroe working that hard?
It's interesting because I don't think McEnroe worked that hard, but I had the good fortune of training with Courier quite a bit, and he was a huge grinder. And we trained in Palm Springs, and we would go 2-on-1s in the morning for 2 hours, and it's run until exhaustion, and then you would go to the net and go on the net side. And so you would do that for 2 hours in the morning, and then you would come back and work on technique and matches and match play for 2 hours in the afternoon, and then you would train for an hour and a half to an hour, depending on whether it was running or weights. And so to answer your question, it was typical for the guys that were doing well.
Okay.
The guys that were doing well and the guys that were excelling and the guys that weren't getting tired in matches and that were more physically fit than the other guys were doing that. Like in any sport, you got your talented guys that don't work that hard. You have your hard-working guys that work really hard, but it can only get to a certain level. And so, you had to figure out which guy were you and how did you want to lace them up.
Tell me about the strength component. Was everybody doing strength training at that time? Was that well known that it was important to be strong as well as...
It's very depressing thinking about it right now because you probably remember this. It was more lifting heavy weights and getting big and strong. And as a tennis player, you want to get strong in your legs and have a strong core, but your upper body should be a little leaner and more supple. And so I made the mistake. Well, I was one of these guys that put on muscle if I lifted my pinky, and I made the mistake of lifting a lot of heavy weights. And so I got really big and I was really fast, but then I would wear down because I wasn't an efficient mover, because I was more of kind of one of those guys that muscled everything. And so if I played long matches, that gave me a lot of trouble.
When did that insight come? When did you realize that had happened?
Sort of at the end of my career. And, it's interesting because I remember I would see guys. You probably don't remember Gustavo Kuerten, but he was a Brazilian guy that made it to number one in the world and won the French Open, and a super nice guy. He was in the gym, and he would have one of those stretchy bands like the swimmers use, and he was doing functional exercises like using his hips and his arm and everything in unison. And so he was, using the chain to develop power from the ground up. So legs to hips to arm. And he was doing doing forehand swings and serve swings. And I remember looking at him and thinking, this guy's wasting his time, like with these little bands. Like, it's so dumb what he's doing, but that's what I should have been doing. And I was the one who was really dumb and not thinking through, hey, I'm a big guy. I need to lengthen out. I need to do more yoga. And I didn't realize that probably until like the last 3 or 4 years of my career. And then it's hard at that point because you have a real rigid mindset, and at least I did, because I was trying to protect myself, because everyone in the tennis world would come and say, hey, have you changed that? Or I noticed this is different. And they're always trying to jack with you. And so you had to be real careful on who you listened to and who you trusted. And so I was pretty insular on who I trusted. And so when I did change and I started trying to lengthen out, it made my game a little different. And so I wasn't supple enough in my mind to realize that that was good, and that I needed to adjust, and I needed to get a little length, and I needed to kind of mellow out on how I moved and get a little more flow in my game. And so it was hard adjustment for me. And I probably took it on a little late, but it helped me.
And do you think you've embodied that growth mindset in other areas of your life? It's something I think about a lot. And we've talked about it on the podcast, this idea of the growth mindset, embracing failure as an opportunity to get better. I'm not the best tennis player in the world yet, is perhaps a good way of stating it. But usually people, they have the growth mindset in some areas and then the fixed mindset in others. And so, for example, I might think that everybody who plays a musical instrument was born musical, which is not correct. That's the fixed mindset. But do you recognize these ideas? And do you think you were in the growth mindset in some areas of your life but not tennis? Or how did it work?
What was interesting is I was really open to change and really open to trying things. But, you get in this mode when you've seen something work in your limited experience, as you know, with age and with life and with reading and with understanding, you grow and you see things a lot more clearly. I mean, how many announcers are calling the match and saying, oh, I can't believe he missed that shot. Like, it's a lot easier from the sidelines to say, hey, but I was open to change and I did adapt a lot in my tennis career and I tried a lot of different things. But to a point, I kind of resisted it, and I wish I wouldn't have resisted it. And I feel like one of the things that tennis does teach you is I lost probably every week of my career. So if you didn't realize that you have to learn from your losses and that it's not the end of the world. And so every time I lost a match, I tried to think it through and think through, okay, well, what could I do better next time? How could I change my training? And when I got towards the end of my career and started realizing I wasn't maybe that good and that I was losing matches, then that's when I realized, okay, maybe I need to just try something else and move on.
That's some really fascinating insight there. You need to get good at losing. That's really interesting. You've just reminded me, I've just spent some time with some friends in Vancouver and their boy is about to start his first school. And that's exactly what the school said to him. He needs to get better at losing because when he starts our school, he's going to be losing all the time because all the kids are going to be bigger than him. And at the moment, he doesn't seem like he's going to be very good at losing. So I think that's some really interesting life lessons there.
Well, I guess good at losing, maybe we could rephrase it and say good at learning from your losses.
Yeah, that sounds better.
Because you don't want to ever, I never was good at losing. I was a huge baby. I mean, I would get so mad. And I remember when I was younger, I would take it out on the wrong people. And I would cry when I was a little kid when I would lose. I hated losing. But, as you get older, you realize, okay, well, I could play 100% of my ability and play Sampras, and he could play 70 and still beat me. So you have to kind of look at it also in somewhat of a realistic fashion. You don't want to get too realistic because if you start saying, hey, these guys are better than I am, then that's when you need to stop. But I also think that if you lose a match and you stick your head in the sand and you refuse to acknowledge anything, then shame on you because you're not growing and you're not learning and you're not trying to get better from that experience.
Mm-hmm. Talk about your coping strategies for pressure. So I can't really imagine, there probably are others, but it seems like tennis there's just so much pressure from all different angles. The person you're playing tennis against, the crowd, the commentator. Did you have any coping strategies that you'd use to handle that pressure?
Yes, absolutely. And I would talk to a lot of my buddies that I respected and that I was close to and ask them, how would they handle things? And one of the most important things that I learned probably later in my career was to really have a clear plan and a clear idea of when you get in that situation of what you want to do and what you want to accomplish. Because the biggest problem is everyone's going to choke. I don't care, Federer chokes, like the best in the world choke. But the problem becomes when you choke and you let it turn into more than one point and another point and then a game and then a set and then all of a sudden you're walking off the court and you're like, what happened there? That choke on that big point turned into the whole match and ended up disrupting the whole flow of everything. So one of the things that I tried to really focus on is keeping a simple plan. When I would get in that tight situation and I'd miss my first serve, I knew the guy's weakness. I knew I was going to go to his weakness, and I knew I would try to make him beat me with his weaker shot so that I wasn't just rolling over and giving it away. And, if I knew that the point was going to last longer, I wasn't going to serve and volley, I would try to kind of develop a picture in my mind of a 3-shot plan of here's how I want to win this point. I think that if you can see it and visualize it and then try to just keep it simple, that helps a lot because then you're not going out there and just hitting the panic button saying, oh boy, here we go again. Like I choke every time in this situation, which I've done that one too. I've done them all. So I just think that the simpler you can make it, even when I play in these exhibition events now, you get into a tight situation or a big point and, I still get nervous. Like I'm still nervous and I'm still thinking, oh boy, I don't want to, do this or that. But I try to just go back and think, okay, what can I do Where can I hit it? How can I focus on my toss, getting in the right place, hitting my serve clean, picking my spot, and just focus on that. If I get nervous and I miss it, so what? I can't do anything else about it.
What did you think about John McEnroe's coping strategies? He was quite famous for blaming external things, wouldn't he? He would blame his shoes, or he'd blame the racket, or he'd blame the umpire. It was always something other than him. What did you think of that at the time?
Well, I think that McEnroe is kind of one of those classic examples of anything but me is the problem.
Right.
And I think that he claimed that motivated him, getting angry and freaking out and going nuts. And I personally think it hurt him. And I think that if he would have learned how to control that better, I think it would have helped his game. The guy was obviously an amazing player and did amazing things, but I think it probably overall harmed his game more than it helped him. And I do have so I played Davis Cup for McEnroe twice, and he was a pretty tough coach. He wasn't real, he saw the game kind of one way. He saw how he played it. And he didn't really he couldn't get into your head and say, okay, well, how do you see it? So he would go out and coach you the way that he saw it. And so I think that he was just of that mindset, that he was so stubborn and so set in the way that he did things that I'm sure people told him all the time, hey, settle down. He told us a great story at one of the Davis Cup matches where he said he was playing Borg and he loved Borg. He had a real big, not crush on Borg, but just really liked him as a person and as a human, as a competitor, as a player. And he said he was playing Borg and he was in the third set and it was 5-all in the third set and he got a bad call. And he said that he starts going crazy in his typical fashion, yelling at everyone, throwing his racket. And he said he looked up and Borg was at the net and Borg was waving him to the net. And he said he was like, what's Borg want? This is very strange. And so he said that he walked up the net and Borg put his hand on his shoulder and he said, it's going to be okay. He turned around and he walked off. And that story still gives me chills when I hear it because it's kind of true. It's going to be okay. Unless you can have that attitude in sports and realize hey, we're all competing. We want to win. But at the end of the day, it's going to be okay. And so that story kind of resonated with me. And Borg did keep a lot in and kept a lot trapped in, was the Iceman and everything. But he played very even keeled, and I think it helped him a lot.
Mm-hmm. Talk about how you became better known as a doubles player. Was doubles something you'd always been playing, or did you just transition to it somewhere along the way?
Well, so I have a huge chip on my shoulder about that because I tried really hard in singles. My goal was to be a good singles player. And so, I always, people say, wow, you're a good doubles player. And I was kind of like, no, I played singles also. I wasn't a great singles player. I think it was part of the explanation that I gave earlier. I saw the ball really early and I had really good vision and I was really fast. And so I was really explosive. And so covering half a court and not exerting as much physically by covering the whole court was a lot easier for me. I think that my game maybe fit that style a little better because I got so big and so muscly and strong that I was super explosive in a short area. But then if I was covering a longer area, that explosiveness would wear you down. And so when I was covering more of the court, I think that I tired out more quickly. And when I played my best singles, I wouldn't even warm up for matches. I had 8 months of my 10-year career that I played where I felt like I was seeing it like the Matrix. It was easy. I was winning matches. I was beating whoever I played. And it was interesting because I didn't have to warm up because I knew that I was relaxed. I was covering the court smoothly. I was real loose. I had a real head. And I think that it was from all the hard training. And I finally just let I kind of let go and just said, okay, I'm just going to play. But, it was a pretty moment for me. And for me, I had to use max capacity to kind of get to that level.
Mm-hmm.
And so.
And did you always have the same doubles partner or did it vary?
I played with three guys. Well, I played with a French-Canadian guy named Sébastien Leroux, who was super talented and real kind of a lazy guy, but
What do you mean by lazy? Define lazy.
So he was the type guy that I would hit a ball to him and it was 3 feet away. and so I'd say, well, hey, and he's like, no. And so, but then he was also the type guy that we played Becker and Agassi first, our third round in Stuttgart in a big, huge indoor stadium. Becker serves 130 up the tee. He hits a return 140 past Agassi and he move his racket. So, I mean, it's hard to criticize him when he's doing stuff like that. So basically I was always kind of the solid guy and I played with guys that were more talented. And Jared Palmer, that's a Stanford player also that I played with, and we made it to number one in the world together. And then Sandon Stolle, Fred Stolle's son,
was the Stanford Old Boy Network a part of how you ended up playing with a specific player? Is that how it worked?
For sure, yeah. I mean, you had good buddies that were kind of part of your network, and so I think at one point, we played together and we played well together, and so we were like, well, let's give it a shot. And so we gave it a pretty good run, and he's the guy that I played in the Sept, and I mean, we played really well together. Actually, we played a match in Palm Springs, and we played Wayne Ferrer, both talented guys, and my partner played this match. It was just unbelievable. Jared Palmer is my partner. He played an unbelievable match, and I was kind of just trying to hang in there. And after the match, he walks up to me and says, "Hey, buddy, you're looking at the number one player in the world." And so he didn't tell me before the match, but that match put him into number one position. And I'm glad he didn't tell me, because I probably would have gotten nervous and, tried to play better for him and probably would have done poorly because I was trying to do well for him. And so it was a neat moment. And I think maybe like 4 or 5 months later, I took over the number one position because we had both played with different partners the year before. So we both kind of had different points. And so his points dropped off and I took his place at number one. So it was kind of a neat story. And it's the Stanford Network was definitely a big part of it.
Mm-hmm. What was it like to win the US Open? In 1999, you won the US Open in the doubles. What was it like in the double? What was it like?
It was very validating because, I'd made it to 3 Grand Slam finals before that, 2 Australians and 1 US Open. And so I started thinking maybe I'm just a guy that's like, second place guy, and I'm kind of the guy that job done. And, maybe that's my, when we won that, we played a really solid match and beat a really good team at the time. And so it was just one of those where I felt it was almost like I was so happy, but I was also like, man, I'm good to just, kind of etch a little spot in history. It's not a big spot, but it's a little spot and it means something. And so it made me feel proud of myself and happy and like, a lot of the hard work that I'd done through the years was validated in a way. And so I guess proud, happy, kind of the full gamut of emotions.
How did your family respond?
They were really happy. I mean, everyone was, that's really cool. And, I think they had a party for me in my hometown when I came back. And I mean, it was really cool. It was a fun time. And looking back on it, now I look back and think I was lucky that I did pro sports and, but looking back on that was a neat, kind of a stone in my career that makes me feel like, hey, I really was a part of this.
And was it that result that paved the road to the Olympics?
Way, because the next year, my partner and I, who I played with, that French Canadian guy who I told you was a real, he ended up dropping this year to play with the Canadian guy so they could get ready for the Olympics. So I chose to play with an American guy and kind of go for the. We ended up losing second round, and my French Canadian talented partner won the gold. So yeah. So I mean, listen. I'm happy for him. I mean, it's so cool, and I think that's so neat. And I wish we would have done better, but that's like you can't win them all. And we didn't play a great match, lost. It's there's so many matches, and I feel lucky now to have even gone to the Olympics. I mean, it's pretty.
I bet. Well, what was it like? What was it like just being there as an athlete? It must have been incredible.
It was crazy. It was so different from being a pro tennis player and walking into the stadium. I remember. There's a kid not a kid, he's a little younger than I am, from my hometown who was in the Olympics, a wrestler. And I remember walking into the stadium with him, and little square guy who kind of real, bow-legged, and you could tell he's a wrestler by just looking at him. And he looks at me and says, "Hey, do you realize you're about to walk in front of more people than you'll ever walk in front of in your entire life? Look around and enjoy this, buddy." Yeah. And I was like, okay, that's really cool. And so it was a fun, crazy, neat experience that I'll never forget. And
that's amazing. And so was this the opening ceremony you're talking about?
Yes. This guy was hilarious. His name's Brandon Slay. And so I asked him, I said, well, what do you think your chances are of winning here? And he said, good, I'm going to win. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, this guy's nuts. Like, he's like, say, I'm superstitious. I'm like, all the cliches that you can throw out, like if, things go well and he said, I'm going to win. And guess what? He won the gold.
Oh, wow. That's amazing.
I know. It's pretty awesome. Really cool.
How was your tennis career after that? Were there any highlights that came after that?
I stopped in 2001, so that I'd say I peaked out pretty good around there. And I could have played doubles quite a bit longer. My shoulder was a little weak. I had a torn labrum cartilage my whole tennis career, and I just got it stronger. And I knew I could kind of see the writing on the wall. I always liked being a participant in singles and not just playing doubles. And so when I saw that my singles career was kind of on its last thread, and I looked around and I thought these guys are good, I knew that mentally that's not sustainable. And so I just made a decision to pack it in 01, and I stopped at the US Open in 2001.
Oh, wow. That must have been a difficult decision, surely. Did you not have feelings both for and against?
I got a little teary-eyed when I took a shower, after my last match at the US Open, just kind of thinking, wow, this is over, and now I'm, who knows what I'm going to do. I don't know where I'm going to go from here. And, it was a strange position to be in, and in a scary position. And then also, a lot of emotions, just because I'm thinking to myself, well, I only know tennis. Like, that's what I've done. Where do I go from here? And so it was a pretty, I was extremely emotional for me, and I'm not that emotional of a guy. And I just remember thinking, this is a pretty big moment.
And how old were you then?
Let's see here. 31.
31.
So, that was a pretty good age to pack it in.
And where did you go from there? What options were on the table for you?
So I was living in Los Angeles at the time, and my whole pro career, I was very serious and didn't get to go to that many weddings and trained really hard and probably overtrained looking back on it. Maybe needed a little more relaxed time, downtime, rest time, and would have benefited from it. But I didn't understand that. I thought that the harder you work, the better you got, and probably could have benefited a lot from work smart and not hard. I worked really hard and probably not as smart as I could have. And so I took a little time off, and I started my dad's in the cattle business. I started an online steak company, and that was a great experience for me to learn how business runs. And I answered the phone. I shipped everything. I took care of logistics. So I kind of was a one-man operation, did the books. And so that was a great experience. And I also invested the money that I made from tennis in the market. Well, 2001 to 2007, as you know, was a pretty good run. And so I thought it was pretty easy to invest, and, just kind of tried to focus in on something new and different. And I also started, in on the bank, and I was always a member of the board of this bank that I'm now running and the president of. And so, I started kind of getting more involved in the bank and looking at ways to grow the bank. Mm-hmm. And so that was what took up my time, but I also just had a lot of fun. And, I lived in LA, and I just kind of said, hey, I'm just going to relax. I'm going to go to weddings. I'm going to go to, friends' parties. I'm going to enjoy myself. And that was a strange experience for me too, because I didn't do that easily. I'm too type A, and, I started playing a little golf, and I've always hated golf, and now I love golf. So I just tried some things that I wouldn't have done when I played tennis.
When was the start of your health challenges? I thought maybe you were going to tell me that the arduous pro tour career was what was the undoing of your health, and that was how we came to meet. But perhaps not. Perhaps it was the leisure period, the partying that came afterwards.
Yeah, no, I think so. I was always not the greatest eater. And, when we were playing tennis, it was like pasta and carbs. And I wish I would have had you back then, because
no, you don't. Trust me. Like, I don't mean to interrupt you, but back then I was like, I can remember watching the opening ceremony for the Sydney Olympics, and you wouldn't want anything to do with me at that time. Like, all my learning came much, much later.
Well, if you just think about the model and the model that you guys are promoting, it's a good holistic model, and it looks at all parts and all aspects. And, I wish I would have been smart enough. When I played tennis, I never was able to breathe through my nose. And I thought it was because I had a deviated septum. I didn't think like, oh, well, maybe I'm allergic to something that I'm eating, like all this pasta and, gluten and dairy. And I wasn't smart enough to figure that one out. And that's pretty depressing looking back on it, And so anyway, I'd say my poor eating and maybe not partying as much, maybe drinking a little too much, kind of a combo of just bad, lazy habits that I got into, and that I didn't, monitor at all, eating too much sugar. At age 42, my body, I was sitting at my desk in my office, and all my muscles were flabby, and mentally I was in kind of a fog, and my testosterone felt like it was non-existent. And I just, I think I hit a wall, and that's when I was like, okay, I need to do something here. Like, this is not fun anymore, and it's kind of getting serious. And And so that's when I think I heard your podcast and thought this sounds really cool. And, that's when I kind of started digging deeper into it and got, more focused on taking care of myself.
Was there one defining symptom that you think tipped you over the edge? So for me, it was erectile dysfunction. That was the thing, like being kicked off of somebody's stoop for not being able to get it up is a pretty powerful motivator for most men. I don't want to accuse you of that, but was there one thing that was like more motivating than others?
One of the things that I would say that was equally disheartening is, when I was sitting at my desk and I got up, I realized that every muscle in my body was just like flab and it was just shaking. And like, I'd always been a guy that could build muscle really easily and had a lot of testosterone and I just knew, like, when I got up and I just knew, like, this is not right. Like, I'm doing something to my body that's poisoning my body. And I think I listened to you guys talk to Ben Greenfield and go through all of his stats. And that really resonated with me. That podcast where you guys went through and talked about the blood work and the different stats and and what are they doing and how are they affecting other things? And there could be several different paths that these things could follow. And so to me, that was a big turning point for me as well, besides it just my body just quitting on me. I mean, it completely quit.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think that looking inside and doing some testing and figuring out what's going on is really important. But lately I've been thinking so much about behavior change, and really all chronic health problems are just a behavior problem. Was it just the food you were doing incorrectly? I'm just wondering how much of your problems at that time were a deficiency of knowledge, you just didn't know what to eat, and how much of it was like you knew what you needed to be doing, you just weren't doing it, right? Like, I know that sleep is important, it's just somehow I'm not finding the time to make it happen.
I had C. difficile and H. pylori, and then I just finished my last protocol for getting rid of these two parasites. And so I think that my gut was in such a state of disrepair that I think it was a combination. I think my body was depressed, my mind was depressed, I wasn't getting the nutrients to my cells. So I think it fed off of each other, and it's, maybe the chicken and the egg at that point. But I agree with what you're saying. I think a good attitude and a healthy mind and a healthy spirit, as well as, taking care of things, is as important as the looking at the physiology.
Mm-hmm. I think that's absolutely the right answer. It's like trying to get motivated and be consistent and find time to do things that are obviously going to benefit your health is really hard when you're not feeling good. And so you almost need to break that vicious cycle by addressing multiple key points before you can really hope to see improvement.
100% agree. And I think when you get in that funk and you get down in that well, what's the thing that's going to take you out of it? Like where you start. And I, that's what I liked about y'all's program is, I just got back to the process and just started trying to knock pieces of the puzzle off. And I slowly started feeling better and just day by day, I could tell a difference. And I see these visions of my mind working like it did when I was 20. And I was like, wow, please bring that back. Like turn that light back on. Let's go.
And how close do you think you've got to that?
I feel like, and we talked about this a little bit when we talked last time, but I feel like I've improved. I almost, if I put it on a scale, I would say I was around 45%, and I'm maybe at like 80% now. And I feel like I think I have another 20% to go. I think that if I can get, these parasites out of my body, and then I could just kind of get back to somewhat of a norm of eating and just seeing if, I meditate a lot now, that helps me a ton. And I think that, this holistic approach has really helped me quiet my mind, quiet my body, and get things, working properly again.
Mm-hmm. You were definitely a classic example of peeling the onion when it comes to fixing the gut. You do an initial test and you find one bug, and it seems to make sense. It fits in with your history and the symptoms, and so it makes sense to go ahead and treat that. And you do that, and then you do another test, and sure enough, the first problem's gone, but now there's a different one. And so you start playing this game of whack-a-mole, and I'm not sure that we fully understand what's going on, but it certainly makes sense that, biofilms, peeling the onion, we've seen it a lot. in terms of very similar personas, like the same people having the same problems. And it takes a while and multiple gut protocols and multiple tests to get to the point where you're seeing a normal result. And you have now finally seen a normal stool result, which is very encouraging.
Yeah, and I think that, the thing that, and, my brother gives me a hard time. He's like, well, everyone's different, and I just said, listen, you have to come up with a philosophy and something that you believe in. And I think that if you look at the results from the blood test from when I initially started with you guys, and then you look at my blood test now, I think I scored a 1 on your longevity thing or something like that. But they've changed significantly. And not only the blood test, but just my mind, I feel better. So if something works for you and you see progress, then if you're telling me to go and beat my head against the wall 3 times a day, and that brings me progress, and maybe that's something that's good for me. The process that you have everyone going through right now is a right-minded process. And it's, for me, it's just helped me. I feel a lot better mentally. I feel a lot more clear. I can get a lot more done. I'm not falling asleep when I'm reading to my kids at night. I just feel like I have more energy and better clarity.
That's fantastic. It was very encouraging to me as well. So our blood chemistry calculator software, one of the numbers it produces is this 5-year wellness score that was developed independently of us. We're just implementing somebody else's algorithm. And I really like that number because it reduces the complexity of a blood chemistry down to a single number that you can track over time. And so it took me a while, but I have now got a perfect 100 score. And Alex, you were also in that somewhat elitist club.
100. I said 1, so I guess that's kind of the bottom of the barrel. I didn't realize it was 100, but I'm a big believer in algorithms, and I think that if you look at a certain amount of markers, in your blood, and I've read a lot about heart disease and people saying cholesterol is not the main thing. I kind of am a believer in that. I think that there's several factors that go into causing problems for people. And if you have all those factors and they're all bad, guess what? You're probably going to have some problems. And so, if you can eliminate 2 or 3 of them, great. It makes me happy that I'm kind of heading in a better direction now. And, just progress of how do I feel is also makes me a lot happier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm far more worried about Glycomarks. So Glycomark is one of the things that we can predict with the blood chemistry calculator. What it predicts is postprandial blood glucose excursions. And I think it's very good at predicting the loss of the first phase insulin response. So you're supposed to have some preformed insulin stored in the pancreas that gets released before you've even really started digesting anything. Constant grazing, well, you don't really have that preformed insulin because you're constantly using it. And then you may see some really high blood glucose excursions that come as a result of that. So changing your dietary habits, eating 3 square meals a day might be helpful, but then also experimenting with different types of carbohydrates and seeing how they affect your blood glucose. Is that something you've gotten good at now, or do you think you've managed to crack that without being too religious about measuring it?
I kind of do a little mini fast, and I stop eating around 8 and then don't eat till lunch, and I don't feel hungry at all anymore. Mm-hmm. And before, I was eating all this sugar and bread, and like you were saying, I was kind of overcarbed, and then my blood, my insulin levels, my blood sugar levels were just spiking. And so, I feel like now I'm a lot more even keeled, and I'm a lot more, throughout the day, I don't have these big jumps and dips. And then that allows me to concentrate better, allows me to play with my kids more, so it's something that allows me for a much better quality of life. And I drink a smoothie every day. I realize, I have the MTHFR gene, and then I had something that was not allowing me to get rid of toxins well also, that was a deficiency. And so I don't eat folic acid anymore. I eat folate. I eat a lot of leafy greens. And so, a lot of these little things that I learned through your protocol have helped me and helped me kind of take a step in the right direction towards realizing what my body can take. And before, when I was in that crapped out stage of I could eat anything. It didn't matter. I was swollen. I was jacked up. Like, my body didn't even react to it. It was just like, oh, great, some more garbage, throw it in. So now when I do that and I eat garbage like that, immediately I feel it. So to me, that's saying something as well. That's saying, hey, your body actually is working a little cleaner now. You can't keep throwing garbage at it, or it's gonna tell you it's going into shutdown stage.
Right. Yeah, sometimes I wonder, I absolutely relate to what you're saying. And sometimes I wonder if it's just the signal to noise ratio. You know, there was just so much noise before. You could add in 2 pints of beer and yeah, I feel shit the next day, but I was going to feel shit the next day anyway. So like, where was the signal and the noise there? You couldn't find it. Whereas now, recently I've been over caffeinating a little bit and I've started to notice that in my sleep, and then I notice that in the way that I feel the next day. And I'm like, yeah, no, you know what? I don't really need that much caffeine. I can cut back quite easily. And it's just, yeah, trying to get that signal to noise ratio to the point where you can find the signal in all that noise.
And I feel like I'm picking up on the signal a lot better. I still have my bad days where I lose it and go eat several, Reese's peanut butter cups or something just stupid. But then I pay for it also. And because of my body, hey, slow down there, big fella.
Yeah, it was interesting as well. The MTHFR mutation is something that I don't think we take very seriously anymore. It's like a mutation that, so many people have. What do you really know by looking at just a handful of SNPs from this 23andMe test? And I think the answer is not very much. But one of the things that we did see was prediction for elevated homocysteine. So homocysteine is recycled into methionine, and B12 and folate are connected to that cycle. So if there's a problem there, then you may have trouble recycling methionine to homocysteine. So then we followed up with an additional blood test and measured homocysteine directly, and we saw it was 11.9. So at that point, you're like, okay, this guy probably should do something about that. And as you said, folate rather than folic acid, maybe trying to reduce methionine consumption and getting some more glycine. How have you been with organ meat? It's like one of the things I think is hardest to create that behavior change, or dietary change, I should say, is getting people to eat the whole animal rather than just the muscle meat. And I know you enjoy a good steak. So how have you been able to find that?
The bone broth and the choline is the thing that I think, I feel like I've been getting some more of that. And I struggle on, my daughter loves organ meat. I struggle on that one.
Sorry to interrupt you, but how did that happen? Is it just you started at a young age?
I don't know. No, she just likes it. She just really enjoys it. And so it's pretty amazing. And I've struggled on that one big time.
Do you have any coping strategies? So another thing that I've been thinking about a lot lately is that I think a lot of people out there, they know what they need to do, right? Like they know what kind of diet is going to work for them. They know how much sleep they need. They know they feel better and make better decisions when they meditate. They know they need to move their body. They know they feel better when they have more muscle mass, and so lifting weights is good. But then life comes along and gets in the way, right? Like, I don't know, your kid gets sick and you end up in the emergency room, or maybe you get injured on your mountain bike, or maybe some shitstorm emerges at work and you have to take care of it. And then, what do you do? Like, are you going to meditate more, which is probably what you need, or do you meditate less? So I'm just wondering, Alex, do you have any coping strategies that you use when life gets difficult?
I've gotten into meditation quite a bit, and I try to do it twice a day. And when I feel that my monkey mind starts working, which it works a lot, it seems to have an overdrive button, I try to just go to the meditation and put the earphones in, and I listen to a tonal meditation that my cousin created, and it just slows everything down. And then it makes me realize that is not that big of a deal, and I don't need to stress out about that one. Let's just let it go and move on. And so that's helped me a lot. I mean, I think that's helped me maybe more than anything. I'm more empathetic with people at work. It helps me kind of see when I'm saying something to somebody and they're making that face like, oh boy, this guy's an asshole. I feel like I can kind of see that a little bit better, and I can recognize it more. And the more I meditate and the more I slow things down, I'm a type A personality. I want to get things done. I care about efficiency, and I don't want to hear your 9 reasons why you're not efficient. Like, let's get it done and crank it out. And so it's helped me kind of slow down, and the meditation has been a big one for me, like a really big one.
How did you develop the habit? So this is something that's come up quite a lot recently, is it's not always easy to develop a habit of meditation. And I know that the apps, especially Headspace, has got some really great functionality where you can set calendar reminders. It integrates fully with your calendar, and it will, you get notifications on the lock screen and all that kind of stuff. But that's not necessarily going to happen when you need it. You made it sound there like you develop some habit. Something happens at work, or you feel that monkey mind getting going, and then that's a trigger that then leads you into the routine of meditation. Would you say that that's true, or have you got some other strategy that you've used for developing the meditation habit?
Your whole business appeals to athletes, and I think that we're habit forming creatures. And I think that from back when I played tennis and felt like, oh crap, here I go into that nervous, bad funk area, you had to come up with something to slow you down and to like, make you realize, okay, let's go into this. And so now, with just living and life, and, I think it was pretty easy for me to do it. And the one thing that really helped me a lot is this meditation tape that my cousin created really resonated with me. Literally, it was easy for me to do. Like I wasn't the type of guy that could just sit down and cross my legs and think about one word. There's so many different kinds of meditation and ways to block out the rest of the world and slow things down. And this particular method really resonated with me and really worked for me. And so it makes it a lot easier for me to say, Let me take that step to go there.
Yeah, that makes sense. I was going to say, is this tape available online? Can I link to it in the show notes? But maybe I'd be missing the point. That is finding something that works for you. Yeah,
because everyone's so different and people need different types of meditation, and there are so many different types of meditation. And I think that the one lucky thing that happened with me is that I came on this type of meditation that fit me. And so it makes it a lot easier for me to do that whenever my monkey mind gets going. And, I don't have to go cross my legs and sit on, with some Buddhas around me and, hold my fingers out and take deep breaths and think nothing. I can just put on the earphones and just sit down and just slow down. And so it's a nice way for me to kind of get back to reality.
Mm-hmm. Well, Alex, you've been incredibly successful both in sport and in business. And so obviously I greatly value your opinion. Can you think of a way that I could make Nourish, Balance, Thrive better? Is there somewhere where I could be doing better than I am today?
If you could get the word out to more athletes, and not even pro athletes, but just athletes, period. Because I think that your business and what you're promoting takes a certain amount of discipline, like you said with the protocols. You have to really stick with those protocols and you have to believe in them and stick with them and stick through it and realize that this is all about the process. And if you can realize that, and, if you can reach out to the people in the world of athletics and not even like professional athletes, just people that are trying to become more physically fit, oftentimes later in life, that have the knowledge of realizing, okay, every little thing is going to help me. Because at this point, as you get a little older, and it works for young, old, whatever, but I think that the philosophy behind what you're doing is looking at your puzzle, and everyone's puzzle is a little bit different. And then, kind of figuring out how can you reach out to these people that are trying to pick up that extra. That's what resonated with me when I listened to your podcast, and I think it was with Ben Greenfield. And it really resonated with me what you guys were trying to do and what you're trying to accomplish. And it's worked for me as well. So, this is not a paid, promotional bit. I believe in that, this is something that I believe in what you're doing and think it's right-minded and it's really helped me. And I think that the more you could appeal to athletes or people that are trying to gain more athletically, I think that that's where you could really make some leaps and bounds.
Yeah, I very much appreciate that. And it's true that for the most part, we've been working with athletes, and I realize that we've had it very lucky because athletes are really good at following instructions. So you just give them the plan and they execute it like the rest of their plan, and they get shit done and they get great results. But I like the idea of, maybe you don't strongly identify as an athlete yet, right? So you're maybe an athlete in waiting. And I know the British use of the term, you're thinking about track and field events. When you call someone an athlete, athletics, that's what it is track and field events. But the dictionary definition that I have in front of me here is just someone who's proficient in sport and other forms of physical exercise. So maybe you don't identify as an athlete yet would be my comment, like on athletes.
I think that anyone that's trying to improve themselves, you need people that are free thinkers, because I feel like boxed or canned medicine is broken so badly right now. And what you're doing is refreshing, and it's a tough gig, because I think that most of the people would rather take a pill and say, oh, I feel so much better, it's gone away, whatever my problem was, as opposed to finding out, why is this a problem? And then let's solve why it's a problem and let's fix it internally, as opposed to just going and saying what Western medicine does, just take this and it'll make it go away.
Mm-hmm.
It's a tougher battle that you have to fight from your side of trying to figure out what's the problem and where is it originating. But I also think it's a much more gratifying win when you win that way, because you're winning that way and your body's repairing itself and getting back to where it should be, like you were when you were a kid, as opposed to going and taking some drug and masking whatever symptom you have.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, as an engineer, there's a tremendous pleasure in finding things out. I love the lab testing and all of that, because you get to find things out, right? You do some experiments and you try things and you figure out what was going wrong, and there's tremendous pleasure in that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the algorithm thing you're doing is really right-minded, that you're using that. I think that makes so much sense, and the direction that you're going, and you seem to be constantly changing and improving, and that's also awesome. So, I think what you're doing is great, and I think that a lot of people would benefit from it. And, it's just a matter of getting the word out and spreading the word. And I think that the best way to spread the word is the way you're doing it right now. Just have podcasts and talk to people who've done it, and they can kind of tell you, hey, here's what's happened with me.
That's awesome. Well, Alex, you've been truly wonderful. Thank you so much. Can I come and visit you with my kids on your ranch one day?
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, that's an easy one. That's no problem at all. We'll roll out the red carpet for you.
Thank you.
Horseback riding, and we'll have a good time for sure.
As a random question, is the ranch open to the public, or is it very much a working ranch?
My dad's one of these guys that he's very focused on work and getting things done. And so it's a private ranch, and he runs cattle on it, and it's a working ranch. And I think there's 4 cowboys that live out there and work the ranch all the time. And it's going, like, it's going and running, and they're using it as a working ranch. Now, we still go out there and have fun and have some friends out and have some parties, and it's a ton of fun to go out there, camp out, and it's cool.
Yeah, that sounds awesome. Can you buy the meat online still, or is it sold?
I sold the business. It was called Littlefield Ranch, and I sold it to a guy, and I sold it maybe like 10 years ago. Okay. And it was great. It was the best experience. It's helped me so much in the banking business. Now that I have startup businesses come to me and ask me about loans.
You understand them. Okay, I get that.
I know what you're going through. I know, I've been there. I've answered the phone. I've shipped it out. I've took the customer care calls. I've seen that show, and I know what you're going through. So it helps me a ton with my business now.
Mm-hmm. Well, this has been fantastic, Alex. Thank you so much. You are truly wonderful. Is there anything else you'd want people to know about?
I'm happy for you and happy for what you guys are doing. I appreciate you helping me. That's pretty much the word that I'd like to spread. And I think keep it up, keep cranking, keep grinding.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Thanks, Alex.
Okay. Talk to you soon.